Welcome to Resilience Unravelled. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Thackeray. This podcast is a result of my fascination with health issues, resilience, performance, mental health, accountability and critical thinking, along with many of the other obsessions I bump into in my life. I spend my time working with highly successful teams, organisations and people, and this podcast introduces their remarkable stories, as well as my synthesis of the key issues, tips and strategies to thrive in life. If you find this podcast useful, you can also find other information at qedod.com or russellthackeray.com. Stay tuned to the end for details of how to order a free ebook. Enjoy the podcast. So today I'm talking to Bill Protzmann, P-R-T-Z-M-A-N-N, who's a really interesting person I've met who's in California and San Diego, and in addition to being a successful IT entrepreneur, he holds magna cum laude degrees in piano performance and creative writing, concertized and performed for many years with a focus on bringing music to audiences in non-traditional ways, and he's got a fascinating life working with veterans. He's had a torrid life himself and experienced all sorts of depression and suicidal type issues, and he speaks about music and music therapy and music self-care in a way that's really practical and with real sort of conviction and experience. And 2011 he launched Music Care, which is a profit corporation dedicated to teaching practical ways music can be used for self-care. And he's got experience in helping vets and businesses, and his work was recognised by the National Council for Behavioural Health with an Award of Excellence in 2014, which is the behavioural health equivalent of winning an Oscar. This is a podcast that roams over pain, music, suicide, depression, resilience, joy, thrash music, the rite of spring, something I really enjoyed, and I hope you will enjoy it too, because it's been a real joy as a podcast to do. So today I'm very excited to be talking to Bill Protzmann, who's in the States. And Bill's, why don't I let him introduce himself? So, hi Bill.
Hey, good morning, Russell. How are you? I know it's evening over there. Morning for us.
It's evening over here. And where in the world are you, Bill?
I'm in San Diego, which is pretty much as far on the left coast as you can get.
Wow. So have you been experiencing all that terrible weather and those terrible fires and such like?
You know, it actually hailed so hard in San Diego this winter that it stuck. It actually stayed on the ground for about 24 hours. And I took a picture of this little tiny patch of hail next to our front yard garden flamingo and posted it. It's like, disaster strikes, severe weather hits San Diego, and all my cousins are in 8 feet of snow in Michigan. And, so we have our fun out here.
First world problems, I think we call that. But I mean,
yes.
The fires up in the other more northerly to you in California, they've been pretty rough, haven't they?
Oh, it's crazy. I used to live in the mountains, and the mountain where we live has been hit by fire 3 times since we moved, and some pretty severe evacuation type fires, but nothing like that one in Paradise, where many people lost their lives and just the entire town was wiped off the map. It's tragic.
It is, and we talk about resilience in a sort of casual way sometimes, and actually, that's real resilience, isn't it? When that community bounces back, when those houses are rebuilt and that community begins to come back together again. I mean, it will happen because that's part of sort of the human spirit, isn't it?
It is. And you're so right. The tragedy is that it takes pain to bring us together that way.
Yeah.
But the beauty of it is that it takes pain to bring us together that way. You know what I mean? We need that. We need that connection. And I think that we're in a place in the world right now where we could do better with that. I was moved to watch people singing outside Notre Dame as it was on fire. I just thought, gosh, when can we come together that way, sort of internationally? Because we need to. We really need to. We've got to find that resilience more consistently.
It's a really interesting challenge, isn't it? The fact that, and we're thinking recently in Northern Ireland there's been someone who's been murdered recently, and someone in the eulogy at the funeral service said, why does it take the death of a 29-year-old to bring us together to have the conversations we need to have? It's the same with Notre Dame. And you've hit on an interesting theme there with pain, isn't it? And point of resilience is coming back after pain. And maybe we do need these sorts of wake-up calls. Maybe we do have to have pain as human beings so we can, it sort of shakes us out of our comfort zone a bit.
It does. I have sort of recently embraced pain as a more universal experience. I thought about it in the past as, everybody has pain once in a while, but now I think it's something that is more present and perhaps more a part of who we are. And I only say that based on experience. I mean, anybody can read the news, but I've spent a lot of time volunteering with veterans who are in pain from post-traumatic stress or injuries or traumatic brain injury, working with homeless people who are clearly in pain because they have no place to live.
Yeah.
And I've met some of the most remarkable people. Russell, you wouldn't believe it, how incredible these people who you would think have insurmountable pain have not only surmounted it, but they've actually used it to energize their lives. Yeah. That's incredible to me.
And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because we often see pain as a negative thing. Pain is a signal in a way, isn't it? And I know there's a difference between severe pain and chronic pain and such like, but it's a brain signal that people, ignore at their peril, don't they? And they suffer and endure rather than thinking, actually, this is a message. This is something I can, as you say, use as an indicator to do something different with.
We need practices for pain, where we can learn to deal with it in a way that is useful. And I know, athletes, for example, I have never experienced runner's high. And thank you very much. It's not something that I'm signing on for. No. But when you push that hard, and I have friends who are runners and I've read books because it's an amazing sport. But when you push that hard, you train yourself to be able to go through that place and do like 100-mile marathons. Good heavens, who does that stuff? But you can push through that pain and find the energy that's in it at that level, or even at the level of like being a parent with, kids and the stuff that they do that's insensitive. It creates a reservoir of pain. But if you have a resource and a practice for being able to find the energy in that pain and transform it, it doesn't stack up until you're immobilized by pain, right? Because that can be chronic too. Yeah. So my practice for that has been playing the piano. I happen to enjoy music that's deeply romantic and oftentimes quiet, but can also have great angst in it. And I think just doing that has made me more acquainted with pain, so it's less scary, and given me a way to get into it, find the energy, and bring it out. You probably understand that as a musician yourself.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was just thinking as you're chatting how many people have used pain as a cleansing thing, and how runners actually describe that, almost that their brain is rewired when they use that pain. And I'm thinking about some of the effects of psychedelic drugs and this new idea of treatment using minute amounts of psychedelics. And yes. It has a similar sort of brain cleansing function, a sort of rewiring thing. And people, in traditional tribes many years ago used to celebrate pain, didn't they? They used to share pain amongst the group.
Yes.
And it's. I think we've actually, because of the onset of medicine, we've sort of seen pain as something to be eradicated or removed rather than. And I'm not suggesting that pain's a great thing all the time, because actually, I have a condition that creates a bit of pain, and I'd rather not have it. But yes. I think there is situational pain that we can be using more proactively in life, I suppose.
Yes, like the fires or severe weather, but worldwide. I don't know about you, and I've tried to figure out if there's some sort of a graph that shows this. I have this sense that the world's experience of pain, incidental pain or situational pain, has escalated recently. Maybe since 2001, I don't know. But I just get this overwhelming sense, and maybe it's just because I'm older and I get it or something, that there's more pain than we need.
Yeah. Yes, it's interesting. I'm going to have a... Bill, I'm already making notes.
Likewise.
I'm going to have to start, doing some research around that, because that'd be an interesting thing. Because all the data actually points in the opposite direction, that we're healthier, fitter, there are fewer wars, everything's better. But I just wonder if there's more emotional pain rather than physical pain in the world at the moment.
Yes, I think emotional, and also there's this sort of spiritual wandering, where on the one hand we have extremely fundamentalist expressions of religious belief, and on the other hand we sort of have this amorphous thing where people describe themselves as a Jewish Christian who practices Buddhism, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
but who's unchurched. So I think certainly emotional, definitely spiritual. I read an article recently about this online learning program developed by the the Chan Zuckerberg Institute, Facebook people,
Yeah.
called Summit Learning. And Summit Learning is this great online tool for teaching kids in schools, but it's being rejected by communities that have received it for free because it's too stressful and it doesn't have social interaction and all the other things that are part of being human, right?
Yeah.
Those are just stripped out of the online course. And I say this with great compassion because 2 of my 3 stepdaughters are doing online homeschool courses, and one's just graduating middle school, one started high school. And I don't know that the stress that comes from being in front of a flat screen all the time is something that we want as human beings. We haven't done a great job of balancing that or finding the antidote for it. And I feel that it's busting our resilience. I don't know where the research is on that. I'm just speaking off the top of my head from what I see.
Well, there's a huge amount of evidence that a lack of outsideness, a lack of human interaction is actually physically harmful for our well-being, because actually we're animals, we're social animals.
Yes.
And we need that interaction with other people, and we need the diversity and conflict of disagreement and healthy debate and such like. And it is interesting how, if we are moving to a world that has more screen time, and I think we have to sometimes just avoid throwing the computers out of the house and saying, well, actually, let's just avoid it. It's about how do you make that work? How do you build in interaction? And there's plenty. Yes. There is plenty. I mean, I've done conference calls with 20 people. I mean, they're chaotic, but it is a form of social interaction, isn't it? And it's better than nothing.
It is, and it's giving us a way of learning a new social skill.
Yeah.
I really hate to bring up social media, but there are really amazing aspects of social media that work really, really well. And then there's the part that makes all the news, yes. Right? And you don't want to hear about that. But the part that works really well is amazing. I mean, for heaven's sake, we're able to do this on Skype with technology that didn't exist back in the day. And how useful is that?
And I mean, you have done this yourself. I've had conference calls with people in China, the middle of Europe, America, and this country, and you just have to find the time, and then there we all are having conversations and learning and getting different perspectives, and that would never have happened. And and I think musically as well as fascinating, because there's so much on YouTube. When I was a youngster, yes. First into the music world, I mean, if I wanted to understand how a piece of music worked, it was either recording or you'd go and watch an orchestra or something. But now you've got someone demonstrating the opening of Don Juan 50 different times, 50 different ways, and it's all there, yes. Isn't it? There's so much there you can engage with. The risk is that you just engage in a fantasy online world, and that's not so good for the resilience, because it's almost part of rehearsal. Sometimes you have to get out into the real world and engage properly, don't you? And it's the visceral process of dealing with people and such like.
The biggest thing is that, and we get this with social media, so it's easy to stumble online and to make a mistake. And it's odd to me that the recovery online is much more complicated. You can lose a friend in social media over something completely innocuous that would never have happened in person.
Yes.
And I fear that we're losing our skills for resilience in the same sort of way by keeping all of our actions that are related to human connection online versus out there in the world. And I mean, it's crazy, but you've been in front of audiences too. And the funny thing for me is, whether I'm speaking or performing, the number of people who are on their cell phones. And I understand that oftentimes in a business conference, there's things happening, whatever stuff is going on. But I mean, you go to the symphony and turn around and you can see the little blue glow mm-hmm. all over the hall. Mm-hmm. And I just think to myself, wow, didn't we give you a big enough why when you came through the door to pay attention to the 100 people on stage who are offering you this amazing gift right now? That, by the way, you actually paid for.
That you paid for, yeah.
Right? And so I feel like our work needs to be done in the level of maybe maintaining is too much of a preconception, but certainly strengthening our human relationships, the healthy human relationships we all kind of need, like food, it's part of our diet.
And that's really interesting you say that, because I was very taken by, I've just come back from a trip to Vienna, and I went to see the Music of Rhine when I was there, which is, and it's a beautiful concert hall. And it's famous in Viennese society from back in the day when Beethoven, Mozart, and, first and second Viennese schools were working. Because people used to talk, people used to boo, people used to eat. Women used to, people used to knit and sew and crochet, and of course, going to the symphony was part of the social interaction of the time, and it was part of the court. And what's interesting is and it's interesting how our non-interaction with the music now is very insular, whereas in the past it was joining in almost, and Mozart was conducting Don Giovanni or something. People were joining in and singing along. It was more like
yes,
and music was never meant to be stuffy in the way that it's sort of become, but it's also not meant to, I don't know if it's meant to be just oral landscape. You may as well just listen to it on the radio. What's the point of turning up?
Right. That's I think our opportunity as educators to help people reconnect with this amazing thing that's out there.
Yeah.
And I take heart, because even if you're there and knitting, for example, or whatever it is, the music is still working on you.
Yeah.
But the effect that you could have if you engaged with that music less as a soundscape and more as a tool, I think that would change things.
Yeah.
It certainly has, kept me alive. And for most of the musicians I know who are alive, it's also been a great reason for them to continue to breathe, right?
Yeah, well, personally, I believe in and obviously we're going to talk a little bit about this in a minute, but I think the case for the use of music in a therapeutic context, whether that's psychologically, spiritually, or physically, for animals and including human beings. I mean, the case is one. The issue is just now how you deal with it and how you use it, and whether it's a classical solution or a non-classical solution. The actual fact is that music is a vital part of defeating dementia. It's a vital part of well-being, self-care, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's the frustration for me is that we don't seem to have a younger generation. We seem to have a younger generation less connected to music and with greater mental health problems. And I just wonder if you put those two things together and say, maybe one is causing the other.
My colleagues in the music therapy world, I'm not a music therapist, but my colleagues in the music therapy world would be waving the red stop sign right now. It's like, Bill, don't do it. I think that's a valid connection, Russell. The evidence is all around us. And let's face it, we get what we practice, and look what we're getting right now. So does that mean that we need to change our practice if we want to get something else? Sure does.
Yeah.
So, as a musician, I know if I'm going to walk on stage without practicing beforehand, it's going to be a disaster. But if I have practice, I've got an opportunity that goes beyond just creating a soundscape. And whether you're in politics or education or whatever your field is, there's a certain level of commitment you have to bring to your craft to be able to do it well.
Yeah.
I fear that we're losing that commitment to the craft. My kids range in age from my son, who's in his mid-30s, down to my youngest stepdaughter, who's just starting high school next year. So I can see more or less a couple of generations through there. And I know that there's dedication and commitment to the craft, if you will. But it's gotten so focused, it's almost myopic. Imagine a doctor treating you for a foot issue, and he never reads the chart to understand that you have lungs that have to work too, and that they're compromised, and that if he wants to amputate your foot, he better check with the pulmonary folks and make sure that you can survive.
Yeah.
But they're so myopic that oftentimes they miss that, and you'll love this, until the day of the surgery. I've sat with veterans at the VA hospital here in San Diego on the day of their operation, only to learn that they can't go through with the surgery because, they forgot to check one other thing that, has to do with survivability.
Yeah.
I mean, this is basic, right?
Yeah.
And these are experts. There's nothing wrong with them. Medically, they're at the top of their games. But I think we've gotten so myopic that we've lost our more holistic view of one another and perhaps of ourselves, even to say to the point, hey, this music is doing something to me. I better be aware of what that is because it could change me, emotionally.
Yeah. So, Bill, I'm conscious that we've been jabbering away for 17 minutes, and I haven't introduced you and said what you do and such like.
Well, you offered me that opportunity, and
I know.
I promptly went a different direction.
Yeah, exactly. Well, give me a bit of an overview of who you are and what you do, and then we can get back to the conversation. Sorry about this, but otherwise people will be complaining at me again.
No worries. So I'm a piano player, basically. I've played all my life, and while I have a sideline job that actually pays the bills, music is my passion. I'm good enough, but I wasn't, by standards of concert pianism, good enough to compete at that level. There's about, 20 concert pianists in the world who are actually earning any money. But I found that there was something amazing when people listened to the music. It didn't have to be me playing. And I got so curious about that I spent the last 20 or so years of my life learning what it is that we human beings respond to about sound and rhythm. And it's a fascinating study. And as you begin to do that work, you encounter folks like over in the UK. You guys have some amazing work done with music and in education. And some of the pioneers of trying to retain music in public education are or were, I suppose, maybe they're still with us, residents of the UK. That's fascinating work to me, because if you learn something to music, like the ABCs, you're never going to forget it. Music just sort of enhances learning in so many ways, and it's got this amazing ability, as you mentioned, with dementia and Alzheimer's and other things, to get out in front of those and actually be an intervention. And my music therapy colleagues are working hard in that space. Autism, child development, ADHD. My mom, who was a piano teacher, had kids with ADHD sitting for full lessons and performing in recitals, and it's behavioral health care at that level too. So this fascinating thing about music has sort of buoyed my performance of it, going to find audiences who are not necessarily those who'd come to a recital, for example, or who would go to a jazz club, or even sometimes go to hear any music of any kind. And in the most recent iteration of that, I got to work with Guitars for Vets, which is an amazing nonprofit. They teach veterans that are dealing with issues to play the guitar. And after 10 lessons, they get a free brand new Yamaha guitar. But just watching these men and women change as they play the guitar, it's a gift to be able to be in that space and be there when that happens. Yeah. It's so amazing to me. Same with homeless people. And I teach a music class for homeless people, how to use music as a tool. I've been doing that for about 10 years here in San Diego. And I get a chance also to work with people who, like myself, are suicidally ideated. And that's the most interesting work, I think, Russell, because you get to sit down with people who just don't have anyone else to talk to about these feelings of suicide and be human together. There's nothing more in terms of a goal or an objective other than that, just being in the same space and occupying that space together as human beings. Same as I do at the piano. It's an invitation for people to join into this musical journey that we take together. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
And so just to help me understand, so are you saying that you're teaching people to play and therefore they're getting a benefit from that process, or actually you're teaching people to listen?
Well, both. In Guitars for Vets, so I'm a piano player. In Guitars for Vets, I can tune a guitar, but I can't play it. It just doesn't work for me.
Right.
But I know enough about music to help beginning guitar players at least get started. So in that case, learning to play the instrument is part of the process. Same with drumming. Everybody can drum, and I'm a certified drum circle leader, whatever that certification might be good for. Yeah. But, playing drums is something we all do, starting when we got, our uncle gave us a drum set on our 4th birthday, and our parents got all upset about it. So playing is great. Listening is great, too. So the science on it is that the sound that touches our eardrums is incredibly powerful. And we want to be really careful what we do when we listen to things. Even background music can stimulate us in ways that sometimes we want, sometimes we don't. So becoming aware of what you're listening to is a very, very important aspect of engaging with music for any therapeutic purpose, or even for the ones that we use, when we go to the gym to help us do better, stay up longer. There's all those aspects of music that are so supportive of getting and keeping your edge, if you. So listening, performing, of course, jogging down, through the marathon with a keyboard on your back, just so you can have some music therapy on the way. It's silly, but I mean, who doesn't see runner listening to music these days? So there's a track for that, right?
Yeah.
And in a very important way, that's a personal way of being able to keep your edge. I love the fact that music connects us, as you can probably tell from our conversation, and being offered that gift of sitting in the healing space with a veteran who's dealing with post-traumatic stress while they play music. That's a huge gift. And if I could take anyone by the hand and offer them that gift and say, hey, just sit with me for 10 minutes with this guy as he plays guitar and see what's happening here and how it's working. That's the most amazing thing. And you can tell, you've probably had this experience where someone will come up to you after a concert and they want to say something and they don't have the words, but you can see in their eyes that they're trying very hard to convey something important to you.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the words don't happen at all. They just say, Bill, thank you for what you played, or whatever it is. But you can tell there's more going on.
Yeah.
That's the experience, right? That's the thing we want to get to. And if we're doing it well, if we're responsible with our craft and we can offer this music, that response will happen for the people who want it and are ready for it. And it can happen in a bar, by the way. It can happen at a symphony concert. It can happen over a drum circle.
It's very interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's time for a terrible joke, but I played the viola, so people used to come up to me at the end of concerts and say, "Please don't say that. Please don't play that again." But there's always plenty of viola jokes to go around.
Oh yes, Victor Borge is the best one. I won't say it, but you can look it up later.
Which one was that? Sorry,
Victor Borge.
Go on. Which one was that?
Oh dear. So what's the difference between a violin and a viola?
I don't know.
A viola burns longer.
That's right. There are so many sites dedicated to viola jokes. I think so. We're being a bit cliquey now, aren't we? But why not?
You're lucky. I can't find a good piano joke to save my life.
There's many, but I'm afraid none of them are repeatable online.
Exactly.
So what you've been alluding to there is really quite interesting because you're sort of highlighting three things. You're talking about playing music, which is interesting, and as a player myself, you learn the value of listening, cooperation, give and take, diversity. You learn all these useful life skills. But then you're talking about the difference between music as an art form, but also music as a soundscape, and using music as an emotional boost, as a runner or a meditation technique or as a therapy guide. They're all sort of more, and I'm thinking also about films and such like. They're all soundscapes, aren't they? They're all really they're taking a set of vibrations which are pleasing to the ear and generating an outcome, either increased performance, an emotional reaction to people kissing on a film or something, or if you think of, I was watching actually Brief Encounter recently. I haven't seen it for ages. The old film from World War II, and it's just all the way through. There's the Rachmaninoff Second Piano Concerto. And I mean, maybe I'm a bit big, getting old and soppy, but you do cry. And if it was different music, if it was Jay-Z or Eminem, you just wonder, whether that would work. Is that? I mean, partly it's because of its time, but also because it's just great music.
I agree with you, and there's great music today, but I don't go, and that because of who I am, I don't go for the emotional depth of anything that I've heard by today's rap artists, the same way I go for the emotional depth in Rachmaninoff. But I'm just one of 7 billion people, and the key is helping people understand what does it for them. So, brief lesson. So we feel 4 different things, basically: fear, anger, sadness, and joy. 4 primary emotions. So what music does it for you on each of those 4 things? And most people have some idea about those, but a lot of us have gotten to a place where the only music we're allowed is joy music.
Yeah, true.
For whatever reason. And you say, well, what music scares you? And the way to get into that is to go back to the movies, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes when people put a visual image with music, they go, oh, well, clearly this music from whatever, Psycho, let's say, is very frightening, and it triggers my fear. So with a little help, you can get to the place where you've got music associated with every emotion that you are capable of feeling. Whether or not you allow yourself to is a different question. But, I mean, think about it. Russell, 3 out of those 4 emotions are emotions we don't really like. I'm sadness, that's okay, but fear and anger, I mean, we try to suppress those things. And I, again, not being a scientist on this, but I think our failure to suppress fear and anger well enough is leaking out as pain. And if we had ways of being able to find the healthy expression of fear and anger, if only fear and anger, I think we'd be in a better place as a human race than we are right now with our unhealthy expressions of those things. Just a guess.
That's very interesting you say that. Sorry to cut across you, but
no, it's right.
But it's interesting because there's something very cathartic about the violence of music as well. And there's some we see people going to thrash concerts and in the mosh pit, and they go in and they come out exhausted. Because actually, what you're doing is you're using up that emotion. I mean, emotions are for energy, and that's the point, isn't it? And
exactly.
That violent music, the fear and anger, that violence that comes from. I remember years ago, being a music student and hearing the Rite of Spring for the first time and having it on very, so loud. It's one of the reasons I have tinnitus today. But and I think
me too. Good for us.
All musicians have got tinnitus, haven't they? It's our professional badge of honour, sort of thing. And
yes.
But it's fascinating because it's cathartic to understand fear and anger, because it is, as you say, a part of the human condition, and it's about making sure that you can express that. Because if you can't express those things, either to music or through music, then it's actually very much harder to deal with that, build that emotional intelligence to, for example, the workplace, because you have to learn to express yourself in any way that you can.
Exactly, and the constraints in the work environment are huge on this. You just can't be too far outside of the guardrails. But we need to find ways of being outside those guardrails that are as healthy and safe as a mosh pit. Well, that's kind of safe, or any kind of a concert where you can go and have that full experience.
Yeah.
And actually participate in it emotionally in a way that releases all the stored up stuff that's just sitting around waiting for some way out. I love that scene at the end of Immortal Beloved where Beethoven is conducting his Ninth Symphony, and he can't hear. And he keeps on conducting long after it's over, and the orchestra is kind of looking at him, and the audience is looking at him. Will he ever stop? He couldn't hear a thing, but he knew what was going on. And the marvelous thing about it is that we now know, even if you can hear it in your inner ear, your system has the same physiological response as if you heard it, with fully intact eardrums.
Yes.
And that's marvelous to me, because I can sit here and remember the opening of the Rachmaninoff 2 piano concerto, and I get chills. Yeah. Just thinking about it.
Yeah.
I know the experience is coming. I've practiced. I mean, I wish I could play it someday. I'll be able to play more than the first 7 bars.
Yeah, they're the best ones, though.
It's so phenomenal. But that emotion, that physiological response, only comes from practice. It's like an athlete who's getting ready to go on the field. They're ready. They know what's going to happen. And when the whistle blows, everything begins. And they know that they're in the zone, just right at that moment. So it takes practice to get there. And people who go to death metal concerts all the time, some of the happiest people that I know, some of the highest IQ people that I know are death metal addicts. They love it. Why? Well, because it lets them get all the other stuff out. Maybe it's just the cerebral stuff is so heavy for them that they need that to engage the emotional side, and the physical side, and let it go. And those are the kinds of ways that we need to learn to use music. And I think if more people learn them, they'll be more engaged with them. It's amazing to me, the music that's available now. It's so incredible. There's everything out there.
And it's fascinating, isn't it? Your point is really interesting, because the priming power of music. So, if you think about, I think about the Super Bowl and the adverts, and the organ.
Yes.
When you go to that, you need to hear 3 notes. So you know what's coming next. You're primed. You're ready. We know that. I think of actually piano concertos are really good for this. The Grieg, the Tchaikovsky, the Rachmaninoff.
Yep.
3 or 4 bars, you know what's coming next. You know what's going to happen. And you think of some of the music, Hans Zimmer, the film music and the Batman films, such like. You only need to hear the beginning of Hans Zimmer, and you're there. You're primed. So it's no surprise that sports organisations use music as a sort of an emotional trigger. It's interesting. I was talking to a CEO recently who's had sort of performance anxiety before doing media interviews, because people used to get excited and such like, and I just give them a film, a music track to listen to, and it's that priming piece, that knowing that this music goes there and it's unalterable, and actually you can link performance to a piece of music and almost code performance and music together. You can rehearse that through coaching, and so you can use all these mechanistic social psychology and business things with music to increase performance. And this is not just you and I making this up. This is properly evidenced and properly researched, and it just amazes me that we don't use the power of music more in not just in the therapeutic world, but just in our normal way, in our normal lives, in a slightly more mindful way, rather than just having some old stuff on your iPod.
Exactly. That's kind of my mission in life. I love the fact that we have neuroscience that backs it all up now. In fact, I read a book called Pitch Anything, I think is what it's called, where this guy he's taken the neuroscience that you basically get from people who are in functional MRIs listening to music. So that's where they find the neuroscience. And he's applied it to how to go in front of a venture capitalist and win the deal. It's the same neuroscience. And if you know how to use that neuroscience, it's part of you anyway. It's just sort of figuring out the ways in so that they work well within your scene. And whether you're doing media presentations or performing in front of people or pitching an idea for the first time, or even having a family meeting and trying to get the kids to do their homework, the neuroscience works. And we musicians have always known that. We've been doing this for a long, long time, and we could have said to them, "Oh, well, we told you so."
Music in shops.
Exactly.
It affects buyer behavior, the different sorts of music you have. And so, that energy, it's just energy and vibration in a way. And it's really interesting because actually, if you had people who were really down, who'd really depressed, for example, or anxious or stressed, being able to find a piece of music that you could play that either actually allows you to really thoroughly wallow or gives you hope or whatever it might be, it's that priming piece, it's that trigger, it's that way of being able to get out of the slump, isn't it? It's a way to use music as a therapeutic intervention.
Yes, I love that you said priming piece. That's a good thing. My approach to music, based on my own life, is that I'm here thanks to music. Literally, I chose to keep breathing because of a piece of music, which happened to be by Rachmaninoff. But the point is that the difference, instead of trying to switch my depression off, which I've learned to do all my life, I let it stay on and use the music to find out how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Ah, interesting.
I find that to be the only way that I can get relief from the persistent sort of suicidal thoughts.
Yes.
And when I do that musical experience, or even if I don't have a piano available or recording available, I'm learning the practice of finding the bottom, if you will, of an emotion. It's scary. It's scary to do because it's not how we're taught. Like, don't be too angry, Billy. Don't be too sad, Billy. Well, I'm saying, no way. I'm going to be as sad as I need to be to find out where the gold is at the bottom of this well. And it works. It's a mental relief to be able to know that I can go through some chunk of time where I'm depressed, but that there's a reason for that, and I'm learning that reason as I go through that process, rather than knowing what it is beforehand and saying, okay, well, I'm going to be depressed now, I'm going to achieve that when I'm done. No, you just have to go with it. And music is the safe and effective way for me, and I think for many people, the safe and effective way of being able to encounter those feelings we don't like, but with power after the safe experience of them.
So you're
saying,
so you use music purposefully to help people with depression and suicide?
Sure. From my own experience, that's basically why I play the piano, to be able to convey these incredibly heavy feelings of sadness, fear, anger, and of course joy to an audience. It's not manipulation. It's opening. It's an open invitation to say, "Come on in and see how this sounds. See how deep this can go into your anger, and what you will find when you're done." It's an amazing thing. Rite of Spring, you mentioned that. Every emotion in the world in there in a brand new way. Wow, did that shock people when they heard it? It still has that ability. If you can stay with that, the results at the end, in all aspects of your being, are just remarkable. And hey, we've got recordings. You play it anytime you like, right?
Yeah, and 73,000 different interpretations. I mean, that's the joy of music as well, isn't it? You know, anyone can anyone can have their. Bill, I've just noticed we've been jabbering over 38 minutes, and I'm being incredibly disrespectful of your time. Look,
no, I'm good.
I'd love to be able to point people to the sort of tools and resources that you've created to help others. So, how can people find out more of your work? What have you got?
Well, I'm all over the place. If you Google for Bill Protzmann, provided you can spell it, you'll find all kinds of ways to get there. But the easiest way to sort of engage right with the process is to find the music site quest.musiccare.net. That'll probably be in the show notes, and I can give it to you later on too. But quest.musiccare.net is sort of a gateway and an invitation to find how to interact more intentionally and deeply with the music that you love. Doesn't matter what the music is. It really makes no difference at all. What you love is what you love, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
But that quest can take you in a very insightful and personal way to a new kind of musical journey that I believe is life-changing. It's changed my life. Yeah. So that's an offer for anyone who's out there right now. Take a look.
Brilliant. So, and I know you've written a book called More Than Human.
Ah, yes. So the human spirit is a beautiful thing, and through the volunteer work I've done with veterans, I got to work with a committee of people on moral injury. Moral injury is basically when a warrior has to go out and break things and kill people, and that contradicts with their religious beliefs or their belief systems. And for most of us in the Judeo-Christian world, do not kill is a big thing, but war is a necessity. So how do we deal with that? Well, that moral injury is a paradox that you have to resolve. Out of that, we discovered the U.S. Army had done a study on the human spirit. They felt it was part of readiness. If your spirit wasn't ready, you weren't ready. And if you're not ready, you can't go out with a unit because you'll be, slowing the unit down. So the resilience of the human spirit, the readiness and preparation of the human spirit has become a part of the way that the U.S. Army, anyway, and perhaps others drill. Well, the committee was interesting, but we dropped the work at some point, and I felt we had a book there, so I went ahead and wrote the book and included not only the U.S. Army study, but there's been some other research done in the business world about how businesses that pay attention to their human spirit are better places to work. They have employees are more engaged, the leadership is more interesting, and other businesses like to work with you in that situation. So the human spirit is a big part of success in the B2B world. And it's been an interesting journey to say, oh yeah, music is cool, and there's this thing about the human spirit too. So if you can think of it as left brain, right brain, music sort of handles that right brain thing, and this book sort of handles the left brain side. And together, they're a holistic track, if you will, for self-care. Hadn't intended it that way, but it kind of happened, so I'm going with it.
Yeah, great. That sounds fascinating. I like the fact that you've had the the discipline to actually write that book.
Yeah,
we all know that one. I've got 73 on the stocks at the moment, and Paul and my colleagues busy beating me up to get on and do with it. Bill, you and I could chat all night. I could chat all night with you. Perhaps one day we can do a second edition of this, because I'd love to delve into a bit more detail around some of the sort of tactics that you use. That would be lovely to share with the audience some more practical information, because you sound like the sort of person who's had the experience of living it and helping other people. So maybe we could do that another time.
Would be glad to, Russell. Happy to share. Just put it on the calendar. I'll be there.
All right, that's smashing. Bill, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a joy to talk to you. Please do take care.
We hope you found today's podcast useful. If you did, why not subscribe and listen to our other podcasts? We would love it if you could leave us a review. To access our resilience coaching, contact us at info@qedod.com. And finally, if you'd like to download our free resilience ebook, go to qedod.com/free ebook. Thanks for listening.